Welcome to your deep dive all about government contracting. Today we're zeroing in on some new executive orders and how they might impact your business. We've got this really insightful analysis that breaks down the potential shifts in the landscape.
Yeah, these executive orders, they could really shake things up in the government contracting world. I mean, they touch everything from hiring to how you structure your work environment, even the types of contracts that you might go after.
So let's dive right into the specifics.
Mhm.
The analysis highlights four major executive orders. Could you give us a rundown?
Sure. So first up, we've got the rescission of Executive Order 11246. That's the one that used to require affirmative action programs for federal contractors. Then you've got the prohibition of DEI programs. And then we've got the mandate for federal employees to get back to in-person work. And finally, there's federal hiring freeze that's going to be in place for at least 90 days.
Wow, that's a lot to process.
Yeah.
What are some of the immediate implications that government contractors should be thinking about?
Well, for starters, the rescission of that executive order, the 10446, it could mean less red tape for contractors, especially those small and medium-sized businesses. That might be a welcome relief. But it does make you wonder how contractors will keep building diverse and inclusive workforces now that those specific mandates are gone. And then the ban on DEI programs that could streamline some administrative stuff. But it also means contractors really need to think carefully about their approach to diversity and inclusion.
So it's a bit of a balancing act, right?
Oh,
Adjusting to these new requirements while still upholding those values.
exactly. And that balancing act continues with the mandate for federal employees to go back to working in person. I mean, this definitely has implications for contractors who provide services on site. There could be a surge in demand, but it also means they might need to rethink their workforce models and maybe adjust to a less remote-friendly environment.
What about the hiring freeze? How does that play into all of this, especially considering it seems to contradict the potential need for more on-site personnel?
Yeah, it's a bit of a puzzle, isn't it? The hiring freeze, on one hand, it could open doors for contractors to step in and fill some critical gaps within federal agencies. But on the other hand, it could also cause delays in awarding or renewing contracts and potentially put a strain on budgets, especially for smaller companies that depend heavily on those government contracts.
So it's a mixed bag for sure. It sounds like careful planning and strategic thinking are going to be super important for contractors as they navigate all these changes.
Absolutely. The truth is the full impact of these executive orders is still unfolding. We're in new territory here. Contractors need to stay informed, stay engaged with stakeholders, and be ready to adapt as things evolve.
Let's talk more about that uncertainty.
Yeah.
What are some specific things that government contractors should keep an eye on as these policies roll out?
Well, one thing to watch out for is how consistently these policies are actually being carried out. You might run into bureaucratic delays, different interpretations by different agencies, and even legal challenges that could throw a wrench in the whole implementation process.
So it's not just a matter of reading the executive order and knowing exactly what to expect.
Exactly. Contractors need to be prepared for some gray areas and be ready to adjust their plans as needed.
What would you say is the most important thing for government contractors to remember right now?
Plan ahead. Don't wait to see what happens. You need to think carefully about how these changes might affect your business and start developing your strategies now.
So be proactive rather than reactive. Anticipate the challenges and the opportunities and have a plan ready to go.
Exactly. And that means talking to your clients, your employees, your partners. Find out what their expectations and concerns are. Get their input as you put your strategies together.
So communication is key, internal and external.
Absolutely. Open and transparent communication is crucial to minimizing risks and making sure everyone's on the same page as you navigate this ever-changing landscape.
Let's dig a little deeper into some specific strategies that government contractors can use to address these changes, starting with diversity and inclusion in light of the rescission of Executive Order 11246 and the ban on DEI programs. How do you think companies should adapt in this new environment?
Well, even without those mandates, building a diverse and inclusive team is still incredibly important for a lot of reasons. You want to reflect the communities you serve. You want to attract and keep top talent. Contractors might need to actively look for talent from underrepresented groups by partnering with organizations that focus on diversity recruitment or going to job fairs that target certain demographics.
So it's all about being intentional in your recruitment efforts.
Exactly. Take a close look at your job descriptions too.
Yeah.
Make sure they're inclusive and appealing to a wide range of people.
Avoid using any language that might unintentionally discourage certain groups.
Right. And once you've got a diverse pool of applicants, make sure your interview and selection processes are fair and objective. You might want to use structured interviews with standardized questions.
So there are definitely steps you can take to maintain a commitment to diversity and inclusion, even with these changes. What about the return to office mandate? That seems like a big shift for companies that have embraced remote work.
It is. Contractors might need to invest in physical office space, upgrade their IT infrastructure, and reassess their security protocols. And you have to remember, some employees might not be willing or able to come back to the office full time.
Which brings us back to the need for flexibility.
Yes. Contractors might have to offer flexible work arrangements like hybrid models or compressed work weeks to keep their current employees happy and attract new ones. The key here is to talk to your employees early on, understand their needs, and be open to different options.
So communication and adaptation are central to all of this. We'll continue exploring these themes and dive deeper into practical strategies in part 2 of our deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive looking at how those recent executive orders could affect government contractors. We were just talking about the return to office mandate and the need to be flexible.
Right, offering hybrid models or compressed work weeks. That seems like a good way for contractors to keep their talent and stay competitive in this shifting landscape. But let's switch gears for a minute and talk about that federal hiring freeze. I'd love to hear more about how contractors might approach that whole situation.
Well, the hiring freeze, it's a bit of a double-edged sword for government contractors. On the one hand, it could really increase the demand for contractors to fill essential roles in agencies that can't hire new employees directly.
So there's potential for growth there, especially for those contractors who have specialized expertise in areas where the government needs help right away.
Exactly. Think about things like cybersecurity, healthcare technology, infrastructure development. Those are all areas where the government often relies on contractors anyway. And with this hiring freeze, that reliance could become even greater.
Makes sense. But you mentioned challenges too. What are some of the potential downsides contractors should be aware of?
Well, the flip side of the coin is that the freeze could also lead to delays in awarding contracts or renewing them. Agencies have to navigate these new restrictions and figure out how to allocate their resources. And that takes time.
Which could mean uncertainty and budgeting issues, especially for smaller businesses that rely heavily on a consistent flow of government contracts.
Exactly. It's a balancing act. Contractors need to be ready to seize opportunities, but also be prepared to manage potential disruptions to the current contracts or upcoming bids.
So what are some practical steps contractors can take to navigate all of this?
Well, one important thing is to stay informed about any exemptions to the hiring freeze. For instance, positions related to national security or public safety, those are likely to stay unaffected.
So focusing on those areas could be a smart move. Are there other areas where exemptions might come into play?
Yeah, positions that are considered essential for the agency's core mission, or those that are funded by specific grants or programs, those might be exempt too. The key is to really study the guidance from the Office of Management and Budget and stay updated on any changes or clarifications that come out.
Knowledge is power, right? It sounds like keeping those lines of communication open with your government clients is essential in this environment too.
Absolutely. Staying in close contact will help you understand your clients' needs, their timelines, and any roadblocks they're facing because of the hiring freeze. That way you can anticipate any potential delays or changes in their priorities and adjust your bids accordingly.
So it's all about being proactive and adaptable.
Exactly. And don't forget about the power of networking. Going to industry events and talking to other contractors can give you a real edge.
It's like having a shared intelligence network. Everyone benefits from the combined knowledge and experiences.
Precisely. You can find out which agencies are still awarding contracts, what skills are in high demand, and how other contractors are handling the hiring freeze. It's a great way to learn from each other.
We've spent a lot of time discussing the potential challenges and strategies for adapting. But let's go back to that uncertainty around implementation for a second. It feels like a lot of this is still unfolding in real time. How can contractors best prepare for that lack of clarity and the potential for things to be inconsistent across different agencies?
That's a great question, and it's probably one of the toughest aspects of this whole situation. The reality is there will likely be variations in how different agencies interpret and implement these policies. There's not a lot of uniformity.
So what's the best way for contractors to deal with that potential for inconsistency? Is there a one-size-fits-all approach, or does it really depend on the specific agency and contract?
Unfortunately, there's no simple answer. There's no magic formula that works for everyone. The key is to be flexible and adaptable. Don't assume that what works for one agency or contract will automatically work for another. Be prepared to adjust your strategies based on the specific situation you're facing.
So due diligence and a willingness to be flexible are essential. Are there any other practical tips you can offer?
One crucial piece of advice is to document everything. Keep thorough records of your conversations with contracting officers, any guidance you receive, and the steps you take to comply with these executive orders. That documentation can be incredibly valuable if any discrepancies or questions pop up later on.
That's a great point. It's always better to have a clear paper trail, especially when you're dealing with complex government regulations. Any other words of wisdom for navigating this uncertain terrain?
Don't hesitate to ask for clarification when you need it. If you're not sure how a particular policy applies to your situation, or if you get conflicting information, reach out to the contracting officer or your legal counsel and get some guidance.
It's better to ask questions up front and get things cleared up than to make assumptions that could backfire later.
Exactly. And always remember the situation is constantly evolving. Things are changing all the time. So staying informed and being ready to adapt are crucial for success in this new era of government contracting.
Excellent advice. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us today. We've covered a lot of ground, but it's clear that there's still a lot to observe and learn as these executive orders continue to be implemented. We'll be back in a few minutes to wrap up our deep dive and leave our listeners with some food for thought. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into how these new executive orders might impact government contractors.
Yeah.
Like we've been talking about, we've analyzed potential impacts from hiring and diversity to the return to office mandate and that federal hiring freeze.
And we've discussed how crucial it is to be proactive and adaptable in the face of all these changes.
One thing that keeps coming up is the importance of staying connected with each other. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Networking and engaging with those industry groups can be so valuable. They're a great resource. It's like having access to this collective intelligence where everyone benefits from the shared knowledge and insights.
Exactly. Attending those industry events or joining relevant associations, it can really give you those real-time insights into how these executive orders are actually being interpreted and implemented on the ground.
So it's not just staying informed. It's also about finding a community of support and expertise. What other resources would you recommend for government contractors during this transition?
Don't underestimate the importance of legal counsel. Having access to expert legal advice, especially from lawyers who specialize in government contracts, that can make all the difference.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
That legal expertise can help ensure compliance and navigate those tricky details of these new policies.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that this whole landscape is still evolving. What we've discussed so far, that initial analysis, it's a great starting point, but you can bet there will be new guidance, new interpretations, and legal challenges that pop up along the way.
So staying vigilant and adaptable is key.
Absolutely. Think of it like navigating a ship through uncharted waters. You need to be ready to adjust your course as you come across new information or obstacles.
That's a great analogy. You need a skilled crew, the right navigational tools, and the ability to adapt to whatever conditions you encounter.
And just like a ship's captain, government contractors need to make the most of their networks, their resources, and their expertise to successfully navigate this new environment.
The analysis we discussed posed a final question that I think is worth pondering. How can you as a government contractor prepare for the uncertainties that might come up as these policies are implemented? What steps can you take right now to make sure your business stays agile and competitive in this changing landscape?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? There's no easy answer. But by embracing the principles we've talked about today, proactive planning, engaging with your stakeholders, committing to continuous learning, and having a flexible mindset, you'll be in a much better position to navigate the changes that are ahead.
So preparedness and adaptability, those are the keys.
Exactly. Stay informed, stay connected, and stay ahead of the curve.
Excellent advice. Thank you so much for guiding us through this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
We hope this deep dive has given you valuable insights to navigate the ever-changing world of government contracting. Until next time, keep diving deep.